Okay, so our group, we are discussing zone proximal development. It was a method put forward by Vygotsky. One of the things, I guess, just to get us going, that I liked about it was some of the other learning theories, they feel specific, like learning is based upon kind of one sort of thing, and it's just kind of pretty narrowed down, whereas I felt like ZPD, it applied in a lot more ways. It was a little more broad. It could go in any classroom, any content. It was kind of flexible to the learner, I felt like, in a lot of our I guess modules have kind of dealt with us needing to differentiate when we need to for our students. And I kind of felt like ZPD let you do that. One thing that I'll mention and someone else can jump in, I thought it was kind of interesting, the term more knowledgeable other, and how that could really be anybody. We would typically kind of think of that as the teacher or, us to our students. But, if we're doing group work, the MKO could be one of the students in the group that just might have more background knowledge, being able to be that MKO for another student. So it kind of allows anybody in the classroom to play that role if they want to. So with that, I'll let somebody else chime in on kind of what they liked about it.
Yeah, speaking of MKO, I had often thought, like, when we started using, online resources, like I use Khan Academy a lot for math. They have a lot of good resources. And I was like, would that qualify as an MKO? I mean, it's not really one-on-one interaction, but it is learning from another person that's more knowledgeable. And I never really thought of that before. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, the term's pretty broad. It's more knowledgeable other, and in that instance, that's what a website or any other resource, that's the role that is playing. So personally, I would think that it would fit.
I've never really thought about it not being a person, but like you said, Kipp, it's very broad. So I don't know why it wouldn't. It's a resource that's more knowledgeable. So yeah, I would think so too.
Are there any ways that you guys have seen from what you've read that, ways that you think you might implement this in your classroom maybe next year, or ways that you already have this past year? Any of the methods or the strategies that it kind of goes in with it?
Go ahead.
One of the biggest things, so I'm a volleyball coach, and so I really try to push having students teach other students rather than me having to go in and fix everything per se. So like I'll have like my upperclassmen help with the underclassmen, or even high school help with school. So I like to do a lot of the student to student learning from each other to kind of fill in those holes that maybe they just didn't get to, or things like that. And then it kind of helps the upperclassman student, learn the material even better for themselves. So I push that a lot within my classroom and on the court, and especially, so I teach business classes. And so a lot of my classes have a wide range of freshmen through seniors. So it's kind of cool to also do that in my classroom as well.
I'm also a high school business teacher. I teach 7 different subjects, and one of those subjects is digital media. And when I was studying this theory, it kind of crossed my mind at some of the assignments that I was assigning. And it was really interesting. I'm doing this anyway, and I just didn't know that it had a theory, I guess, backed up with it. But like, for instance, I taught a high context, low context culture assignment. And in doing the research, I came across a strategy called scaffolding, which is important regarding this theory. And it's where the teacher instructs small steps according to the tasks of a child's already able to do things independently. So like at the high school level, for them to work independently, they're used to that. However, they were not aware of high context cultures and low context cultures. And the way that so they were able to learn in steps and in groups about different types of cultures and how we have to, I guess, respect different cultures. Like, for instance, China, they didn't know that they love gifts. And when they give you a gift, you're supposed to be able to return that, to give a gift and so forth. And so anyway, the teacher should also support and assist the child until he or she can complete all of the steps independently. And so another area that I did in tiny steps until they could work it independently. And this was creating a business summary plan. And of course, then they compete in a competition, but until they can complete and understand and perfect like an executive summary or their competition, segment in their business plan or other segments of the business plan, the teacher is supposed to be there to guide them. Sorry, I guess that was a little lengthy.
No, that was perfect. And it actually made me think, because I'm a business teacher as well. And I think a lot of what you said is exactly right. And it also made me realize we haven't really summarized what kind of ZPD is. And that's basically students have what they can do. There's what, like, at that moment, what they're maximized, what they could do. And then that ZPD, that zone, is that sweet spot between those two that you want to operate in to kind of grow that knowledge gap that they have. One example of how I use this in my classroom, I came across the one scaffolding method was I do, we do, you do. So in part of my business classes, we make merchandise like t-shirts, hoodies, all that kind of stuff. And at the start of the year, I'm basically demonstrating everything to them. Like, I'm showing them how to use our vinyl cutter, the heat press. And then they learn a little bit that way. And then they start to do it with me supervising. So then it's more of a we do. And then they grow to the point where they're basically doing it and I'm off helping other students. So I kind of thought, that's kind of scaffolding in the sense that I start, we kind of do it as a team, and then they grow to where they're doing it on their own.
That's kind of with another Fort Hays assignment that I had. We had to pick a new technology and then have someone film it as I'm interacting with the students. And so I picked a program called GIMP, and I had to learn with the students because had to be a new technology. And so I found myself like, how would I teach myself? And then I took notes and did that. And the end result, it's like I have this, little film of me walking around asking each student what tools they used. And we all learned like together. And it's just something that I know I will always like to take time to watch, because it was such a big task. But when I chose to break it down, like in, the baby steps and what this theory conveys, it's kind of all comes together, and it's nice to know that there's a theory behind it.
And mini lessons is a scaffold as well, kind of chunking up bigger lessons to more manageable pieces. I know I came across one of the scaffolds was building prerequisite knowledge. And I want you guys to kind of chime in here, because I know one of the big things I learned about myself this first year was I was not good at gauging or even trying to assess and figure out how much knowledge my students had about a topic before we just jumped in. And as the year went on, I kind of found I assumed a lot, and they didn't know what I thought they would going into it.
I almost do the opposite. I assume they don't know anything. And then I'm like, oh, you guys, you can do this already. All right, cool. Let's move on.
That's what I should have done. That's what I should have done.
Well, and so I teach math. Last year I taught algebra and geometry. And yeah, the I do, we do, you do, that gradual release of responsibility. That was every lesson. I would start every lesson with demonstration. Like, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. And then they would practice. We would work through it together on the board. And then at the end of the class, they were doing this stuff on their own. And the goal being, they could manage that. And then the next class, we'd have a big practice activity where they were all doing it. They were working together, and I wasn't doing anything but supervising at that point. So it's like your whole school year condensed down into, an hour and a half, 2 hours. Just, I start, then we do it. And then, so like scaffolding every day in math. That's how math is built. You can't move on until you've got what you're doing right now. So.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to bring up. Kind of what I gathered about ZPD in general is that a lot of it is based on the student's previous knowledge, and you really have to understand what they know first. And so that was one of the things that I teach elementary art, so a little bit different. But one of the things that I didn't do a lot, but I did a couple of times, was just do not necessarily a pre-test, because I don't like the word test, but just like some kind of activity to gauge what the students already knew first. And it's kind of hard for me to implement that into every lesson. But the times that I did do that, the kids were way more successful. I was more successful with my lessons because I knew what they knew. Like, for example, drawing self-portraits, like I had them do like a little quick drawing first before we talked about anything, and just seeing the difference between what they had first and what they could do after our lesson, and then having them be able to compare that. That was a really successful thing. So I plan to do more of that kind of thing, just like a pre-test or a pre-activity, something that not only gives me information about what they know, but it kind of gets them just like an introduction to whatever it is that we're doing. So.
Yeah, and they may find that they're surprised how much they already know.
Right.
I found that, doing some pre-tests in math, some students were like, oh, I apparently I have learned this before. This is not all brand new. And that could give them a little more confidence.
Yeah.
Which is the big downfall of math, is just no one has confidence in math.
One thing that helped me in my investments class that I teach, I actually found some online questionnaires, like little tests that they could take. And of course, if they get it wrong, they can take it again, because it actually will kind of eventually give you the correct answer. And so when that class starts, I'll say, go to this particular link in Google Classroom that I've uploaded for you through ClipGrab, so you can access it. I want you to answer these 10 questions, just because I want to see what knowledge you do have in different areas. And then when I tell them you'll eventually get the correct answer, then I state, when you get all of the correct answers, I'd like you to write this in your notes. And that particular questionnaire kind of gives them what we're covering for the next 2 chapters at least. So, but that took a lot of research to find something like that, but it's been well worth it. And now I have it, and that's how I start off.
Yeah, and kind of with the pre-assessment stuff you were talking about there, Traci, if we don't know that, we don't know what zone we need to be operating in. So really, if we don't do some sort of pre-assessment, pre-test, we really couldn't use the theory very well, because we don't know what zones we need to be operating in. So that really kind of is critical with this. Another thing I liked about it was, and maybe it's just because I really tried to be careful with this with my classroom this last year, was just the social environment they were in. This theory does kind of talk about socially, they need to be in a healthy and a safe place for them to really be able to learn their best. And I kind of like that it factored that in, because a lot of the other theories don't. And I think it's a huge part of learning, and they actually talked about it. I think he said at age, in one of the articles I read, he said at age 3 is when we kind of start to internalize language and dialogue and start talking to ourselves. And it kind of mentioned, that talking to ourselves, how it needs to be positive and things like that. So I did multiple things once a week in my classes, where I tried to just mentally get them in a place where they felt like they had accomplished something and stuff like that. I'm not sure if you guys saw these terms, but there were 2 terms, productive struggle and learned helplessness. I thought productive struggle was a really neat term. It was basically that, you need some sort of struggle to be growing, and not to be struggling for nothing. So I don't know. Did any of you come across that term?
That's, I
Three
mean, that's,
pages of notes, so,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
that's something that I use just every day in class. Like part of math and learning math is making mistakes. That's how we learn. You make those mistakes, then you look at that and figure out, well, why didn't that work? What can I do differently? That is that productive struggle, that looking at what you've done and seeing what you can change to get where you need to go. I mean, that's a big part of what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that applies to, assume it could apply to any subject, but I mean, we talk about that in art class all the time. Your art's not going to look like maybe it didn't turn out the way you thought. Instead of getting upset about it, just reflect on it. What changes can you make? Stuff like that. And I'm sure it's hard for students of any age to understand, but at least in my experience with the younger kids, a lot of them get super frustrated when it doesn't work out the first time. And so it's really been one of my challenges is to convey that to them without saying the term productive struggle, because I don't know that they would understand that, but just conveying to them that it wasn't wrong. You didn't make a mistake. This is the process of learning, and this is what happens, and this is what we have to go through if we're gonna, get better. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I say in my class and on the court is we can't say can't in my class, because they'll be like, I can't do this. And I'm like, wait a second, you can do it. We just might have to make some mistakes first, learn from it, and then move forward. And so I really push that growth mindset as well. And I think that really connected well with the ZPD, and it just kind of made everything full circle. And like everybody said, kind of gave a name to something I think we've all kind of already been doing, and just laying it out for us to see and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is just the actual the structure of what being an instructor or a teacher is like. And just really learning our students and finding it between that, what can we do to make, I like that circle that Kipp, you kind of talked about, how it's that little thin circle, the one that what the students know, and then what they need to know, that little line to connect it. Mm-hmm. And I think at being in that teacher role, we get to really sit in that little tiny sliver the whole time for our students. So I think that's a really cool opportunity we get to, and really try to change that mindset for them that they can do it. We just need to make what was the key word you said, Kipp? That was cool.
Which the productive struggle?
That's it. Productive
Is that it?
struggle. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think that was a really cool. I've heard more being in that growth mindset. So, but I think they connect really, really well.
I experience learned helplessness a lot also in math. By the time these kids get to high school, they've decided they're not good at math for whatever reason. Either they had an experience in middle school that they didn't get something right away and turned them off. I may never know why, but so we've got to talk about that at the beginning of the year, about how, just because you can't do this yet doesn't mean you can't do this. This is not a skill that can't be, honed. It's like anything else. You can learn to do anything. If I really wanted to, I could learn to fly an airplane. That's not an investment I want to make. I don't have any, skin in that game, but this is pretty low stakes stuff. It's not, it's not as bad as you think it is. But you've been conditioned to think math and think I can't do that. And then you don't even try. You just shut down. So using that growth mindset just right out the get-go, and helping them to start making those small victories and say, yeah, this is doable. I can do this. That's sometimes one of the hardest things I can do is just get them to see that they can do it.
when a student tells me I can't do this, Ms. Metcalf, I will always just say, you can't do it yet, but we're going to get you there. And it's so rewarding when you finally get through to them and they can do it on their own, you know, and just being a part of that process. And then they're just like excited because they've conquered it.
I was a math tutor for 10 years before I took this job. And that was my favorite part, that aha moment when you got to see a student like, oh my God, I get it. Like everything that he's been saying has been just hitting a brick wall, and finally I get it. I love that. It's my favorite.
And we've talked about scaffolding, and what was that one term? Learned helplessness. In what I read, so learned helplessness is when they can't do something over and over, and we don't provide the proper scaffolding to get them what they need to know to be able to do it. So when they consistently can't do something, and they don't elevate that, they get into learned helplessness. And I remember when my business class, when we started the year, it's in an actual store. Like we have an actual store that we have class in. Our school owns it. And they count the cash drawer every morning. There were a couple girls when the school year started, for whatever reason, they would fight having to count it. Everybody took their turn, but they just didn't want to do it. They just didn't want to do it. And then by the end of the year, they were almost volunteering for it because, okay, well, let's go over and we'll count the cash. So then, you know, just that little help was like the scaffolding to get them to where they knew it. But then scaffolding, because I think I kind of ran into this with some students as well. If you put the scaffolding in place, you get them where you want them to go. But then if you don't take that scaffolding off or down, then they get bored because they don't have to do anything on their own. They're not challenged. And I had some students, they were just, you know, gifted in that subject area. And honestly, they didn't need any scaffolding. And I think next year I can do a lot better job of recognizing, okay, you're not being challenged right now. What can I do so you are, kind of a deal.
One thing that helped me, not in my current job, well, it's actually reflected on things that I do now at my job, but when I taught as a college professor, as an adjunct faculty, I taught corporate governance, ethics, and social responsibility. So I had the students work in groups, and I always tried to pick opposites, like where one was strong and one was weak. And then there's not such this panic or, you know, where they get threatened or, you know, scared about the project itself, because I put somebody with them that complements the other. And then the learning process, I think, becomes easier because you don't feel like you're out on an island trying to navigate yourself around to something that's foreign, you know. And so that's been something that's helped me a lot in my classes right now, is just knowing what I've done in the past and how it worked. And the outcome was quite positive. I don't know how much of a contribution that was, but I think we learn as we go. And, you know, like with him being a math teacher, that was kind of my weak point, because I had to get 62 hours of outside tutoring to pass my statistics class in order to get my bachelor's degree. And
well, statistics isn't math. That's why it's like
Thank
a weird
you.
stepbrother.
Oh, I know, that was so tough for me.
I know one of the
Exciting when you make a good grade, you know, if something you didn't even understand. Sorry.
no, you're fine. With one of the things I was kind of questioning with ZPD was, well, how do you tell if you're operating in the right zone, if it needs to be less challenging, more challenging? One of the people that wrote in the article, they use a percentage chart. And if they're scoring 35% or lower, the content's too hard for them. 36 to like 69, you're operating in that right zone. 70% and up, the content was actually too easy. I like the process that they're using, but I guess when I saw that, and you guys can chime in, I kind of disagreed with the percentages they used for determining what zone they were in. I mean, I don't know, saying 36% is a threshold to where you're operating in the right zone. I'd want them to at least be getting, I mean, if they're getting below a 50, I'd say that the content's too hard. I mean, I just kind of disagreed with what they used, but I liked their idea of how to structure zones and know whether they need to move up or down.
See, one of the things I look for most is just engagement. Like, you know, if a student is not engaged in the material and they're not doing well, then it's too hard. If they're not engaged and they're doing well, then it's too easy. You know, it's that sweet spot in the middle where they're engaged, and you see some progress there. You know, that's what I look for. I look for that progress. And it's not, as much as I love math, I don't think that's necessarily a quantifiable factor. You know, you've got to just be able to see that in the moment, because I don't want to wait until I give a test to say, well, are we operating in the right zone? You know, during a lesson, I want to be able to see, oh, they've got glazed over eyes. Either they don't know what's going on or they don't need this material. And then very quickly you can see which one of those it is. You know what I mean?
What I don't understand is, like, how do I explain this? So I'm going through, you know, the chapters and the curriculum, and I'll have a student that, wow, you know, he answers all the questions verbally, he passes the quizzes, he's doing everything perfect. And then the test comes and he fails it. And so I had him stay after class one day and I said, you know, you knew this stuff. Like, and he goes, I think every time I take a test, I just clam up. And like, you know,
I've had that happen. I've had students where I know that it's like they'll come into class, they'll have the panic face, the flop sweat, and I'll be like, you know what, you and I can do this in another time, another situation, just one-on-one. I've even gone as far as I'll ask them the question, they will give me the answer, and that's the test, because that's all it is really. And just that little bit of differentiation can alleviate some of that test anxiety. One of the other jobs I had before I had this, I was the ADA services director for a local college, and that was one of the most popular, the most common accommodations we would make was outside testing in a quiet, private location, tests being read, just because all those factors in a test can stack up against the student being able to just show you what they know. You know, I don't care how well you take a test. That's not what I'm measuring. I want to know, do you know this material? So if the mode of the test is the problem, change that mode, right? You know, find another way for them to show this is the material we've talked about. This is how I have it mastered. So I've done all kinds of things to make those tests different when I need to. As long as I get the information I need, I don't care how I get it.
mm-hmm. I've used my planning period to do things like that, because I said, I want you to come in here during my planning period, and I'm going to ask you 5 out of 10 of these questions that you missed. And do you know, when I stood in the exact same spot, I usually would stand in front of him with my podium, so he would really be paying attention. And he was able to answer them verbally. And it just kind of was like, okay, maybe this is what I need to do for him, because he knows that. I think just seeing it on a test scares him.
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, I obviously, you know, I can't diagnose people.
Right.
My son's he's dyslexic. And so sometimes just like writing things down, he's a little bit dysgraphic too. he says he can't get his writing to be as fast as his brain. He's got all these thoughts and he can't get them out. But he can talk about it all day long, So, just another output method may be all that kid needs.
And one of the scaffolding methods that I came across as well was, I'll just pull the article up here. It was using visual, sensory or auditory aids. So it's all just, how does that kid learn best? How are they really good at, learning or expressing what they've learned? Use that as a scaffold to help that kid do better. So, I mean, kind of exactly what we're talking about. And I think I found this with a lot of the different lessons is we're kind of doing the things it's talking about. We just didn't have the terms to put to them. We just didn't know what it was called.
Yeah.
But
a lot of this is common sense, intuitive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is nice to put some terms to things and kind of go a little more in depth on it. But yeah, it's not all been like completely foreign, I guess. We have 6 minutes left on our time limit here. Does anybody have any sort of overarching thoughts they maybe haven't gotten a chance to get in yet? Kind of anything to add?
Well, all of the notes that I've taken, we've pretty much covered it. So.
And did all of you guys get that Google Doc I sent out? Or maybe you haven't had time to check yet.
No, I was working away. I was almost late to this meeting. I looked up, I was like, oh no.
You want us to just type on that and then you'll copy and paste it and pull it over? Or-
Well, I think what'll happen is if we all, so on that Google Doc, if we all just kind of typed what we ourselves talked about, then it'll kind of put everything in that one doc. It'll get filled out really quick. We each have to upload that and share it ourselves. But
there's a part 2 to that, I think. Like after that, we have our own analysis of the whole discussion at the bottom right.
Yeah. So if we each put in what we've kind of brought to the talk, then we'll get all the part 1 stuff done, and then part 2 we do on our own and upload that.
It's like another group that I was in, the one that was in charge of it, like you kept, I sent her my notes and then she just copied and pasted it all over. And she's actually still waiting on one person to finish theirs.
Well, Rashelle, I was in your group as well. I think with the rest of us, we just copied our notes in, we just copied it into that one document. And like, I've already gone ahead, even though someone still hasn't done that, I just copied it and I've already put that all in the discussion board. So I don't know that you necessarily have to wait for her to do that. I mean, I just went.
Well, I was just going on what Macy said.
Yeah.
So, but I replied to like one of her boards and then incorporated our Zoom because I didn't know it was going to get uploaded on time.
Yeah.
But if I don't, because every Zoom group does something in a different way. And so just hoping you have the communication correct and all that.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
I guess.
On my Google, pardon me?
Oh, I was just going to say, just, kind of here at the end, the main reason I put this particular theory out there when I came across it was just, I just felt like it was practical. It can apply everywhere. There were some other theories and parts of them make sense. I think all the theories have their own place somewhere, but yeah. I just felt like this one applied in the most places and was kind of the most practical, everyday, what it's actually like kind of theory.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I enjoyed talking about this one.
Just had a nice flow about reading.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm doing this in class and I'm incorporating the types of assignments that coincide with it. So.
All right. Anybody have anything else? Couple minutes? No? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I will get this uploaded. If I run into anything, I'll let you know. I'll also just let you all know once I do get it up there, just so you guys kind of have that update. So
Can I
And
ask one more question?
Oh, go ahead.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to understand, like, so if I type what I put by my name on the email that you sent, and then everybody else does, then that's what will be uploaded, correct?
Right. So what I sent out was that Google Doc with each of our names on it. So when you type what you said, your notes on what you said in that doc, it'll update for all of us that have that one Google Doc. And so if we each type for our own name, then our whole sheet for that section 1 will be filled out because it's going to update for each of us once one person does their name. Does that make sense? And then
Yes.
we need to upload our own of that with the number 2 with the second section. Then you will need to upload your own to where it says in Blackboard.
Yeah, Rochelle, do you have that
But-
document pulled up right now? Do you have that Google Docs open?
No, I don't. I don't even know if I did the first time around. I mean, I'm 60 years old and I have learned so much in like 2 years. Like I never even worked in Google Classroom until 2 years ago. And I've really like amazed myself, but just watching my students, you know, I've come a long ways too when they're working in Google Docs and so forth. But this is something that I just learned like last semester about what we're doing to get it uploaded and sharing. And I keep forgetting that it automatically saves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll have a link to that doc, and then you'll just open the doc with that link, and you'll see other people's info update. We can help you that. I just want to make sure, because we have less than a minute, that I get this stopped and converted before that time limit runs out. So, but we can definitely help you, Rashelle, with that Google Doc if you need it through like emails and stuff like that. But for the Zoom, I better end that before we run out of time. So,
All right.
all right.
Nice to
Thanks a
meet
lot.
you all.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Thank you.